The crate hit the ground with a loud bang, metal scraping against stone as the guards laughed. "Here's your prize, human," one of them sneered, shoving the box toward the prisoner's cell. "Something for your amusement," the other added with a smirk before walking away, leaving the large container behind bars with the man inside. Eli, the human, looked at the crate with narrowed eyes. He had been locked in this alien prison for months. Maybe longer, time blurred together in the dark. Cold room? He never asked for gifts, never trusted surprises. Especially not from aliens who saw humans as toys or threats. The box hissed and clicked, then slowly opened. Inside was something he didn't expect. It was a girl, alien barely. Older than a teen in human years, her skin had a faint blue hue, her body thin. Her arms curled tightly to her chest. She didn't move. She was trembling. Covered in dirt and bruises, her clothes were torn. Barely hanging on her fragile frame, one eye was swollen shut. The other blinked weakly at the light. Eli crouched slowly, keeping his hands where she could see them. He had seen what the guards did to creatures like her. This wasn't a gift. It was entertainment. Cruel entertainment. "Hey," he said gently. Voice low and calm. "I'm not going to hurt you." No response. She flinched at his voice. Then tried to curl tighter, like she wanted to disappear. He pulled off his blanket, the only thing he had for warmth, and placed it over her carefully. She froze, confused, then slowly peeked up at him. There was no hatred in his face. No hunger for pain. No twisted grin like the guards had, only quiet. Concern outside the cell. The cameras blinked red. The guards were watching, waiting for a reaction. They wanted screams. They wanted violence. But Eli just sat near her, not touching. Just breathing slow and even, letting her see he was no threat. Hours passed. She hadn't spoken a word. Not even a sound. But her eyes stayed open now, and she watched him move around the cell. When he offered her a piece of his food ration, she didn't take it. But later, when he looked away, the piece was gone. She had eaten it quietly in the corner. That small act told him one thing: she still wanted to live. That night, she had a nightmare. Her body jerked in her sleep, soft whimpers escaping her. Lips. Eli didn't touch her, but he spoke softly from across the room. "You're safe here. I won't let them touch you again." Her shaking slowed, just a little. Maybe she heard him, maybe not. But her breathing calmed. The next morning, one of the guards came to mock him. "She doesn't talk. She doesn't fight. She's useless. Just a broken pet." Eli didn't respond. He just stared back until the guard left. He knew better. He saw it in her eyes. There was still fire in her somewhere. It was buried deep, maybe nearly gone, but it was there, and he wasn't going to let it die. She started watching him more closely. When he cleaned a wound on his arm, she stared like she was learning. When he stretched his arms or touched the walls, she copied him, just slightly, like she was practicing how to move again. She hadn't spoken in days, but her silence was louder now. It wasn't fear anymore. It was focus. Eli began talking more, even if she didn't answer. He told her about Earth, about trees and warm food and music. He didn't know if she understood, but sometimes her eyes softened like she wanted to. He told her his name. She blinked slowly, then lowered her head. He wasn't sure what it meant, but it felt like something changed that night. She crawled closer, not close enough to touch, but closer than before. She laid down on the blanket he gave her. Still watching him with tired eyes, he didn't speak, just nodded, letting her know. It was okay, and for the first time in this cold cell, Eli didn't feel completely alone, somewhere in the dark. Beyond the blinking red camera lights, the guards were silent. They didn't understand why the human wasn't playing along. They didn't know that kindness could be more powerful than violence. They gave him a broken girl for entertainment. But instead of breaking her more, he gave her something they never expected: hope. Asterisk, the cell was always cold, but now there were two bodies, inside one human, one alien. She hadn't said a single word, not even a whisper, yet Eli could feel. Her eyes on him, every move he made, she watched. When he cleaned the cut on his wrist using cloth torn from his own shirt, she stared, eyes wide, not with fear, but curiosity. It was like she was studying him, not just what he did, but why he did it. She didn't eat when he offered food, but later, When he turned away or pretended to sleep, his ration bar would be gone. He always left it near her without a word. It became a quiet ritual. The guards noticed too. They laughed, calling her the mute pet. "Hey human, maybe you." Broke her with kindness. One sneered one day, another tapped the glass. "She's just a decoration now." Eli ignored them because he saw something they didn't. The girl wasn't gone inside. She was waking up, piece by piece. Like a machine that had been shut down for too long, her eyes moved quicker now, her body less stiff. She flinched less with every passing hour. He spoke to her often, not expecting answers. Telling small stories about his life on Earth, what rain smelled like, what chocolate tasted like, how dogs wagged their tails when happy. He didn't know if she understood, but sometimes when he smiled during a memory, he'd catch the tiniest twitch at the corner of her mouth. One night, Eli was sitting with his back to the wall, his legs stretched out, his head heavy with exhaustion. He spoke softly. "Back home, I used to read books before sleeping." He looked at the ceiling as if it were the night sky. "Not much to read here, though." He chuckled, then fell silent. That's when he noticed her. She had moved. Just a little now. She sat with her back against the opposite wall, knees tucked up, arms wrapped around them. But her eyes, her strange, glowing eyes, were locked on him. She mimicked him, head tilted back slightly, eyes half closed like she was pretending to read stars. It was clumsy, unsure. But it was the first time she had chosen to do something. With him, not just observe, but join. Eli looked over, smiled gently, and nodded once. "Yeah," he said, "that's how it feels." She didn't speak. But he could tell she understood something, even if she couldn't explain it the next day. The guards turned off the heater. They liked testing them, seeing how long they'd last in the cold. Eli was used to it by now, but he saw her start to shiver again, bones rattling beneath thin skin without a word. He stood and took the blanket off himself. He draped it over her shoulders and stepped back. She stared at him, hands gripping the cloth, confused. Then slowly her lips moved, but no sound came out. A breath, maybe a word. Trapped in her throat, he sat back down, not pressing her. "Don't worry," he whispered. "Oh, you don't have to talk. Just be warm." Later, he woke to find her curled at the edge of his side of the cell. Not too close, but closer than ever before. She had shared the blanket between them. Just a small sign of trust, fragile but real. But not everyone liked what was happening. Now the guards began talking quietly, the girls getting too attached. One said, "She's not broken enough," said another. They didn't want connection, they wanted chaos. The next time they delivered food, they tossed it in a puddle, soaked it in dirt and chemicals. Eli knew they were testing them again. He picked it up and sniffed spoiled, no doubt. But she reached for it anyway, weak and hungry. He stopped her gently. Shook his head. She looked up, puzzled, eyes wide. Eli broke off a clean piece from his ration, held it out to her this time. She didn't wait for him to look away. She took it from his hand, fingers brushing against his skin for a second. Everything was still. Then she pulled back, held the food close, and nodded just once. A motion so small most would miss it, but Eli didn't. That was the first sign of her voice, not through words, but through action. She didn't speak, but she listened. She didn't cry, but she remembered. And now, she didn't just survive. She chose to stay alive. The door clanged open louder than usual. 3 guards stepped inside. Boots heavy, grins wide, Eli sat up, already sensing something was wrong. He looked at the girl. She was frozen in place, wide-eyed, trembling again. "Time for a little show," one guard said, tapping his stun baton against the bars. "She hasn't screamed in a while." Another chuckled. Unlocking the gate with a hiss, Eli stood between them and her. Fists clenched, heart pounding. "What are you doing?" he growled, blocking their path. "She hasn't done anything." "That's the point." The first guard snapped. "She just sits there like a ghost. No fun in watching her heal." Another sneered. "She was better when she cried." They moved forward, grabbing her arm. She didn't fight, didn't scream, just lowered her head, as if she expected this. That broke something in Eli. She had come so far, eating, moving, watching, learning, and now they wanted to rip it all away. He couldn't allow it. Without thinking, he lunged. He threw a punch so hard one guard fell to the floor with a sharp thud. The others shouted, swinging their batons. Sparks flew as electricity crackled through the air. Eli took one hit to the side, dropping to one knee, but he pushed forward, tackling the second guard against the wall. "Run!" he shouted to the girl. "Get behind me!" She didn't move. She just stared, her hands shaking, mouth slightly open. The third guard hit him in the back with full force. He gasped, fell, but still crawled toward her. "Don't let them take you," he muttered, blood dripping from his mouth. He reached out, grabbing her hand gently. That was when she moved. Her hand gripped his tighter, stronger than he expected. Then she stood not behind him, but beside him. Her legs shook, but her eyes were sharp now, no longer blank. One of the guards laughed. "What's she going to do, cry us to death?" But when he stepped closer, she let out a sound. A low growl, not a scream, not a word, but something primal. It stopped all of them. Eli pulled himself up, leaning on the wall. "She's not broken," he spat. "You are." The guard swung again, but this time Eli ducked, grabbed his arm, and twisted. The baton fell to the floor. The girl moved fast, faster than they thought she could. She picked up the baton, turned it off, and threw it aside. Not for violence, not for revenge. Just to stop the pain, she chose mercy. One of the guards backed away, suddenly unsure. The other dragged his partner out, spitting blood. "This isn't over," he hissed before the door slammed behind them. Silence returned to the cell. Eli dropped to the floor, gasping, his ribs aching. The girl knelt beside him, hands hovering over his chest, unsure of what to do. "It's okay," he whispered, voice weak. "You didn't run." She stared at him, eyes wide. Then she did. Something he never expected. She touched his forehead softly, like she had seen him do to her before. Her fingers were cold, but careful, in that moment. They weren't just prisoner and silent alien girl. They were something else. A bond that had been tested, burned and reforged in pain. That night, she helped him sit up, brought him water even, tore pieces of cloth from her own clothes to wrap his wounds. She didn't need words. Everything she did spoke louder than language. The next day, the guards didn't return. They were watching, waiting, unsure what to do with the girl who no longer obeyed. They had tried to break her again, but instead, she had risen. She wasn't the same anymore. Neither was Eli. They had seen what fear looked like. But now, they were seeing something new. Strength. And the guards were afraid. Because when something broken starts to fight back, it's not weak anymore, it's dangerous. The air inside the cell was thick with silence. Not the kind that felt empty, but the kind that meant something had changed. The girl sat close to Eli now, not touching but near. Her eyes moved constantly, scanning the room, watching every sound, every shift in light. Eli's body was still in pain. His ribs were bruised, one arm swollen, and breathing hurt. But worse than all of that, he had a fever. The last fight with the guards had left more than wounds. There was infection and no medicine. He lay on the ground, sweating and cold. The girl noticed. She knelt beside him, brushing his forehead with the back of her hand like she'd seen him do for her. His skin burned against her touch, and her eyes narrowed in worry. She stood up slowly, her legs shaking like thin branches in the wind. She hadn't walked in weeks, maybe more. Crawling had become her way of moving, silent and small. But now, something in her changed. The human, the only one who treated her like she mattered, was dying, and she could not let that happen. She reached the cell door and studied the lock. Her fingers trembled as she pressed along the edges. She had never tried to leave before, but in her past life, she had seen the guards open it. She remembered small things, blinking lights, the sound of beeps, the way fingers moved. The camera above her didn't move, but she knew it was watching still. She pressed her hand against the panel. Nothing happened. She looked back at Eli, who was mumbling now, lost in fever. Then she turned back to the panel, more determined. She tapped it again, using different patterns, different timing. One light blinked yellow. She blinked too, surprised. Then she tried again. One tap. Pause. 2 quick taps. Pause. Green light. The door clicked softly. She didn't smile, didn't speak, but inside her chest, something burned like the fire Eli had once described in his stories. Not just heat, but purpose. She stepped out into the hallway. Bare feet touching cold metal floors. It felt strange, being outside the cage. The hallway stretched in both directions. She didn't run. She didn't know where to go. But she knew what she was looking for: medicine. Something to cool him down. A sound made her freeze. 2 guards were talking down the corridor there. Voices echoing. She dropped low, crawling again, hiding behind the shadows. Every sound was louder, now every boot step. Every beep of a console. Her heart raced, but she didn't turn back. She found a small room left open, maybe a storage closet, maybe a break room. Inside were shelves, food packs, and in the corner a silver box with red symbols. She remembered. The Red Cross. Eli had drawn it in the dirt once when he spoke about Earth med kits. She opened it, hands shaking. Inside were tubes, sprays, bandages, and tiny bottles. She grabbed as many as she could carry, stuffing them into her arms and crawling back through the hallway. 1 guard passed by but didn't see her crouched low behind a crate when the way was clear. She ran not a full sprint, but faster than before. Her feet stumbled, her knees scraped, but she didn't stop. Back in the cell, Eli was barely awake. He looked up with blurry vision and saw her crawling toward him with her arms full. She looked like a shadow with fire in her eyes. "You came back," he whispered. Barely breathing, she placed everything in front of him, then held up a bottle, copying how he had once opened food packs. Her fingers struggled, but eventually, it popped open. She poured the liquid carefully between his lips. He gagged at first, but swallowed. Then she wrapped him in the blanket and used her hands to cool his skin. Wiping sweat away over and over again, all night, she stayed by his side. No sleep, no fear, just focus. By morning, his breathing was stronger. He opened his eyes, and for the first time in hours, saw her clearly. She had dark circles under her eyes, her arms scratched from crawling. But she was sitting beside him, watching, waiting. "You walked," he whispered, voice rough. She didn't reply with words, but she lifted her chin a little. Proud, he smiled. "Weak, but full of warmth, you saved me." Her fingers brushed his shoulder once, then fell still. Outside, the guards still watched, but they no longer laughed. The girl they called broken had stepped out of the cage she had moved through. Their halls unseen, taken what she needed, and returned, and worst of all for them, she wasn't afraid anymore. Eli lay still, eyes half open, breath slow but steady. He had survived the night. Barely. The girl sat beside him, legs folded, hands resting in her lap. She hadn't moved much, afraid that if she left his side again, he might slip away. The medicine she gave him was working slowly, but the fever had taken its toll. His face was pale, lips dry, and every time he coughed, she flinched. When he stirred again, his eyes met hers, and then he smiled. "Weak, tired, but real. You stayed," he whispered, voice rough like sand. She nodded once, very small, then reached into the corner where she had hidden the last half of her ration bar. She placed it in his hand and looked away, like she didn't want to watch him eat it, but he didn't eat. He broke it in 2 and gave her half back. She stared at it, unsure, then looked at him again. He was still smiling, even through pain, and somehow that smile gave her strength. Outside the cell, the camera blinked silently. The guards were watching like always, but they didn't speak now. Something about what they saw made them uneasy. The girl who was once a silent shadow was now moving, with purpose, and the human he should have been broken by now. But instead he was teaching her to rise. That day she did more than sit and watch. She helped him stand. He leaned on her shoulder, each step slow and painful. But they walked from one wall of the cell to the other, then back again. He hissed from the pain but kept going. She didn't speak, but didn't let go. Later, she wiped his face with a wet cloth. She copied the way he used to clean her wounds. Careful, gentle, focused. He smiled again, wincing. You're getting good at that. A soft sound escaped her throat, not quite a laugh. But something close. She sat back. Watching him drink water she had fetched from the dispenser slot outside the bars. She had learned how to press the right buttons now, how to move quietly enough that the guards didn't notice when she slipped. Her hand out through the small slot and reached for things. Eli knew the guards were letting it happen, at least for now. They were curious, maybe even entertained. But he also knew their patience wouldn't last. Later that evening, a shadow passed by the cell. A tall figure in black armor, face hidden, standing just outside the bars. The girl tensed. Standing protectively in front of Eli, the figure didn't speak, just watched, then dropped something. Through the small slot a sealed packet, silver and clean. The girl grabbed it and stepped back. The figure turned and walked away, disappearing down the hall. Eli looked at the packet and chuckled weakly. They're testing us, he said. Seeing what we'll do next. She didn't respond. She opened the packet. Inside was real food. Not just rations. She fed him first, piece by piece. Then ate only when he had finished. Eli looked at her with tired but proud eyes. You're stronger than you think, he whispered. She tilted her head, eyes filled with quiet questions. I've seen soldiers break from less than you, he added. You don't need words to prove anything. That night, he had another coughing fit. Worse than before, he doubled over, clutching his chest. Blood on his lips, she rushed to him, arms steady, holding him upright. Tears welled in her eyes, for the first time tears she didn't know she could still make. Don't, she whispered one word, cracked and dry, but it was a voice, a sound from deep inside her. Eli heard it, and even through the pain, he smiled again. You spoke, he whispered back. I heard you. The next morning. The guards found them asleep, him leaning on the wall, her curled up beside him, a blanket around them both. The air between them wasn't just silent anymore. It was full of meaning, of trust, of something even the guards didn't fully understand. She had become his shield, his hands, his voice when he could not speak, and now, even his strength when his body failed him, and in return, he gave her something no one ever had. He gave her belief, not in fate, not in systems, but in her. The camera above blinked red. Somewhere, orders were being rewritten, plans were changing, because this girl once considered broken wasn't following the script anymore. She wasn't crawling in fear. She was standing for someone, and that made her dangerous. Asterisk, the sirens didn't start right away. Not when the girl moved through the shadows. Not when she passed the empty hallway near the guard station, and not when she opened the hidden grate in the floor. It had taken her days to find it, she remembered. The layout from when the guards dragged her through the facility. Back then, she wasn't strong enough to remember anything, but now her mind was sharp. Her movements quiet, her heart steady. She returned to the cell that night, crawling through. The vents covered in dust, scratches down her arms, but she had found something important, a way out. It wasn't safe, it wasn't easy, but it was possible. Eli looked at her with confusion when she lifted the grate in the floor. You found a tunnel? He whispered. She nodded, then handed him a pack of stolen supplies, water, bandages, even a small stun blade. He took it, eyes wide, then laughed softly. You really are full of surprises. They waited for the night shift when the lights dimmed and the guards grew lazy. Then she helped him up, wrapping his arm around her shoulders. He was still weak, limping heavily, but he had enough strength left to move, because she was there and he trusted her completely. Inside the vents, the air was dry and hot. Every clang of metal echoed for meters, but she knew how to move quiet. She led him through the dark downturns, under grates, past storage rooms and forgotten hallways. Eli kept whispering, How do you know all this? She didn't answer, but her face told him enough. She had lived in these shadows before. Probably used them to survive when no one else cared if she did, when a guard passed below. Flashlights sweeping across the walls. They held their breath. Bodies pressed into the corners of the vent. The beam missed them by inches. And when the silence returned, she moved again. Never hesitating, they reached a great high above a large hangar. Ships stood below, 3 of them. Most were damaged or locked down, but one had blinking lights and a half-open ramp. She pointed, eyes glowing faintly in the dark. "That one," she whispered. Second word she'd ever spoken to him. Eli gave a weak smile. "You're getting chatty." She didn't smile back, just focused, always alert, always watching. They opened the grate and climbed down into the hangar. Metal stairs creaked under their weight. A camera swiveled above, but she had timed it perfectly. They passed through its blind spot before it turned back. Reaching the ship, they hurried up the ramp. Inside was quiet, cold, but powered. Eli collapsed into his seat, breathing heavy. "Hope you know how to fly this thing," he joked. She looked at the console, then began tapping buttons, not at random, carefully, like she had done this before, or maybe watched others do it so many times. She remembered the engine hummed, lights turned green, and the back door sealed shut. That was when the sirens finally started. The control room realized the ship was active. Red lights flashed across the hangar. Metal gates slammed down to block exits. Guards rushed in with weapons drawn, shouting orders. She turned to Eli, handing him the stun blade. He took it, sat up straighter. Then she rushed to the front panel, tapping faster now, faster than they expected. The ship's guns came online with a loud whine. She hit the firing key just as the guards reached the ramp. Bright blue pulses shot from the underside of the ship, scattering them. Eli laughed, coughing as he did. "I take back everything I said, Jor. Amazing." The ship rose, slowly at first, then burst through the hangar doors with a roar. Metal scraped as it forced its way into the black sky. Chasers followed, sirens blaring behind them. Eli looked back through the window, watching the place shrink into darkness. "That's the first time I've seen it from the outside," he whispered. She stayed at the controls, hands tight, eyes forward. But he noticed her breathing had changed, shaky, like she didn't believe it yet. Then, in a small moment of silence, she looked at him and spoke again. "We're not going back." 3 words. But they hit him like thunder. He nodded slowly. Not ever. They had escaped the prison no one thought could be left behind. A human and a broken alien girl who refused to stay broken. They didn't have a destination. They didn't have safety. But they had freedom. And for now, that was enough. The stars stretched far ahead, darkness all around them, but this darkness felt different. Not the cold of prison walls or vent shafts. This was the quiet space between galaxies, and for the first time, they were free in it. The stolen ship drifted. On autopilot, engine humming low, Eli lay back in a chair near the main console. His breathing easier now. His wounds had scabbed. His color was returning. But it was clear he wouldn't survive long without help. The girl sat near the comms terminal, watching blinking lights flash across the screen. She had not spoken in hours, but her eyes told a story. Sharp, focused, full of something new. Not fear, not silence, but purpose. A warning light blinked 3 small dots in the corner. Tracking signals. They were being followed. She didn't panic. She just stood and went to Eli. Placing a hand on his shoulder to wake him, he blinked, groaned, then looked at her face. The way her jaw was set told him everything they found. "Us," he whispered. She nodded. He coughed, sat up straighter, wiped blood from his lip. "We can't outrun them again. Not like this." She went back to the control panel and began typing. Screens opened, maps, frequencies, military channels. He watched, weak but amazed. "You're trying to reach someone," he said. She nodded once. Then she hit a final key, and across the systems, a transmission was sent, not encrypted, not hidden. A broad, open signal. Anyone nearby could hear it. The message was short, her voice, steady, soft, but clear. "This is Sura, former prisoner of Sector 11. I was sold for entertainment. I was broken, but a human gave me back my life. I'm not afraid anymore." The ship went silent after the message was sent. Eli looked at her, his eyes wide with pride. "You told them," he said. "You made them listen." She didn't answer, but he could see it in her eyes. She wasn't just running anymore. She was defying. Moments later, a red alert sounded. Across the ship, 3 enemy vessels were closing in fast. The same guards, the same system that wanted her silenced. They were here to erase her story before anyone could hear it. Eli grabbed the stun blade and pulled himself up. "I'll buy us time," he said, half smiling through the pain, but she stopped him, shook her head, and pointed to a second message. On the screen, a new signal was coming, in clean. Official, human, Earth command. They had received her message, and they were responding through the window. The dark sky lit up with a sudden flash. 2 sleek human warships dropped out of warp, guns primed and glowing. A voice echoed through their ship's comms. "This is Earthship Valor. Stand down and surrender. You are trespassing, and your actions have been recorded." The enemy ships hesitated, then turned sharply, fleeing back into the darkness. The system that once owned her ran away, cowards behind expensive armor. Eli sank to the floor, laughing breathlessly. "You did it," he said. "You really did it." She knelt beside him, her hand in his. "I wanted them to hear," she said quietly. "Even if I died," he squeezed her fingers gently. "But you didn't." He said, "You lived, and now the galaxy knows." Later, they were brought aboard the Valor. Eli was rushed to medical care. The girl stayed close, never letting go of his hand. Even as machines surrounded him, doctors, commanders, officers, they all stared at her, not with fear, but with awe, because this was the girl from the broadcast. The one who had escaped slavery. The one who stood up and spoke. The one who had turned a human into her only ally and made him family. Months passed. Eli healed, slowly but fully. The girl, now known by name, walked among people freely. She even smiled sometimes, just a little, but enough to matter. She was invited to speak before the Human and Allied Races Council, and when she did, she said only one thing: "You thought you could break me, but he taught me how to stand." And in that moment, the galaxy learned something powerful, that humanity didn't save her for power or glory or reward. He saved her because it was right, because she deserved to live, and no empire, no prison, no chain could silence that truth, not anymore.